And welcome back, and a good day to all. Well, if you're watching the videos in series, then the last video that we uploaded on our project truck here, we went ahead and took care of getting a new cowl installed in the oil catch can. And today's going to be a little bit different. We're still on our project truck, but we're going to migrate in or graft in some more upgrades that came from our 2010 donor Ram. And if you remember from the previous build series, the center console, the seats, the entire dash and everything we took out of the 2010 because it was a sport. And our 2012 here was originally an ST trim level that we've kind of upgraded to a sport trim level. And there was two more items that we took out of our parts truck, our 2010 donor Ram, that is. One of them I'm looking at right now. I'm just kind of tracing down the wiring harness. And that was because that truck, unlike this one, which has nothing in the center console area here of the headliner, had this one in our sport truck. Now, a lot of Rams have this, and what this is the interior reading / courtesy light. Now, we do have an interior courtesy light, as it's called, or a dome light, as you may also know it as, and it's down here, back here in the center. Well, what I want to do is graft in the two reading / map lights, however you want to call these, into the center of our headliner here. Now, that's got an outside trim ring you see here that has our two lights in it. It also has a piece that goes in the back of the headliner, which we also took. These two little ears may look a little bit familiar. That ear there and that ear there correspond with the fastening points for our sun visors. There we go. Sorry, I was forgetting a word there for a moment. So what happens is that this is on the opposite side of the headliner, kind of like this, pushed up into the position. And then once this is in place, and we have our access hole, or square access, or rectangular access hole cut into this partition piece here, one piece just kind of snaps into another. Now, I'll go over this in a little bit, but I've already kind of looked at the wiring harness, and this is the existing wiring harness from our 2012 here, and you'll notice there's only two wires that come out of this wiring harness and go up, and the only thing they feed is our center dome light here. Now, I've looked into this, and I'm not quite sure if I want to do this yet or not, but we could potentially graft this harness into this harness, which this harness came out of the 2010 as the donor Ram, so it's got the remaining of the pinouts that we need to get those center lights to work. Now, I also compared the pinout of the body connector with the 2010 versus the 2012, and it's got the exact same pinout. So that means we can just literally plug this in, and these lights should respond appropriately. In other words, we've got the ability, they should have 12 volts to them that we can just push the map lights in, and they should come on when we open the car door, and when we close the car door, they should, gradually fade out and turn off, again, just like our dorm light normally would. So what I'm in the process of doing now is, there's several other things that were in this wiring harness that were a part of this center console, but we're not going to use it. One of the items that this center console comes with also, other than just the courtesy lights, was that our Sport Edition Ram that we took our parts out of also had the rear sliding glass, in which in that case we don't in this one. So the button will be there when we're done. It won't do anything. And of course it has that module right there, which is for doing things like programming your garage door into your vehicle. And like I said, I've looked into this one, and I don't think we're going to wire this one up as well. I mean, again, the module's going to be there. It's just not going to do anything. So when we're done, you know, we'll have a dead button here and some dead buttons there, but we're going to get what we're after, which is just our two kind of map lights here. And the reason why I'm doing this is that I would much rather have the map and interior lights here shining down where you can kind of see this versus just the one center mounted one. It comes in especially useful especially if you're driving at night and you know, either you or your passenger like needs to look at the phone or a map or something along that nature. You know, you can do it from the center console here versus, you know, lighting up the entire truck by using the single dome light there. So what I'm just in the process of doing was I held up this outside trim piece, and normally this trim piece would kind of just sit like this up here roughly, and I kind of flipped it backwards and got kind of an ideal of where to start cutting into our space here. So I'm going to take this rather slow and just kind of little bites at a time until I get enough of this removed that we can get this piece to fit up into this piece, which, and then of course these two pieces here, this trim piece here, this ring piece actually snaps and locks into our back piece. So it's just a matter of getting enough of material removed here out of our raised section that we can kind of get everything together. So I guess long story short is that we just need to make a rectangular hole where there isn't currently a rectangular hole to do so. So I'm just going to take it a little bit at a time, a little bit of pieces, because obviously I don't want to cut too far over into the sides where the trim piece is not gonna hack it. So I'm going to continue to work on getting this trim section or center section cut out of here, and I'll bring you back. So one moment. And welcome back. So what we ended up doing to help us cut this rectangular hole here is we put that backing piece you saw in the previous clip, slid it up into the headliner, kind of got it to where it was going to be, and put in the two Torx fasteners that would normally hold this side of the little hook for the sun visors in place. So basically it's being held in by two retainers, which holds that in relation to where it sits behind here and kind of gives us a good guide to cut with. So we can kind of now come in here and feel, you know, kind of where the edge of that plastic is, and as well as when we start cutting, we can see the backing, the plastic bracket piece that's now behind this, and kind of give us a guide as to how far over to the side that we need to cut, because in order to get, again, this piece to snap into it. Now eventually what we'll have to do is take these two fasteners loose so it drops down enough that we can kind of clip everything together. But for now, it is fastened up in here. I just had to, again, drop that visor and that piece of A-pillar trim there and just kind of pulled the headliner down enough to kind of sneak that one in there. So again, I'm going to continue to work on this and bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I figured this might give you a better idea of what I was referring to. You can see we've got our back bracket mounted to our roof at this point, again with those two fasteners for the headliner, I'm sorry, for the sun visors. And we just made kind of the first cut here well within the margins, and we're going to slowly kind of come back with our cut here until we get everything exposed that we need to, and then we'll kind of push out more to the sides. Again, just taking baby cuts at a time until we get enough of this out here, out of there, that we can get this to then kind of clip in place. Now, these two back tabs you see on this bracket piece here actually will clip into the headliner in the back, so we just need to make sure we don't go too far behind where we need to go. Otherwise, you know, we won't have sufficient material to clip into. And it's not too bad as far as cutting through this. A standard box cutter is making very short work of this headliner. There's not much to them. You can see a nice cross section of the material there. So again, just kind of taking baby cuts and removing little pieces at a time, and then we'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can kind of see what we ended up with. And is it perfectly straight? No, but again, it doesn't need to be. Right for now, it clears what it needs to clear. And need to make one correction from what I told you in the previous clip. These two clips on this end of this trim actually clip onto the front of our bezel, and then it goes up like this and then snaps into place in the back piece. Now, before I go snapping this outer trim piece back into this piece, what I want to do is I'm going to take these two fasteners out, so that way this one comes down and meets the headliner like it's supposed to, and then we'll pop these two pieces together. There's also the electrical, which I want to drop down in through the headliner, and eventually that electrical will actually go, I think it's across the, well, no, we can go across the back with it, and then down the A pillar here, and eventually it'll connect up to the same connector that this harness is now. So we'll end up just taking this harness out. Now again, we could, in theory, splice into these two, leave this, we're going to leave the remainder of this harness in place. I'm not going to remove that light. It'll just either be a dead light, or we could splice it into the same circuit that's powering these, but in the same breath. Now, if somebody's added LEDs to this, I'll probably keep LEDs in it. I may change these out to red LEDs, to be honest with you, just so when you're driving at night and you need to use the map light, then you're not using white light. You know, if you use red light, then you don't lose your night vision. Your eyes don't have to adjust like they would if you just turned on like a bright white light in the middle of the night. So like I said, that'll either be dead or active. I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet, because what's going to happen here is, there is no on off here. So these would come on as a courtesy as the same time as these. Now with these being LEDs, there's not that big of an amperage draw on the circuit. But if anyone were to ever change these out to a normal bulbs, with that being a normal bulb, there might be too much power draw on the circuit. So what we may do is just leave ourselves some spare wire here in case we wish to change it in the future. And then we'll just clip, heat shrink it, leave this part up in the headliner, and just in that way the wiring's there if we just want to kind of graft it into this harness in the future. But what we want to do is get this harness fed through, and to cover this with you, again, this is out of the 2010, so your connectors may look a little bit different based on the options you have. Now, one of the things that we don't have in this truck, and I didn't want to graft them over, is that this is the connector for the driver's side vanity lights that would normally be inside the sun visor, which we're not using in this one. This is the power connector for the power and LIN bus connector for the garage door opener. Again, the element which we're not going to migrate over, because even if I did make this active, I would never use it. But the issue is this connector doesn't get its power off the main harness connector. It actually got its power from this connector, and this connector was fed off of a different section of the cab harness, which came from the rear of the cab and then came forward and plugged into this one. So since we don't have that power circuit available, that's one of the reasons why we're not going to use the garage door opener. So we don't need these two, nor this third. So these three connectors here, they'll be up there in the headliner. They're just not going to be plugged in anything. Literally the only one we want is this 3-pin connector here, and this is the one that controls power to these lights here. Now remember, these are map/reading lights, so they'll come on as a courtesy when you open the door, or if you're already in the vehicle, you can push up on the little clear lenses in front of them, and they just actuate these switches here, and they'll be able to turn on and off while you're running the vehicle. So we're going to fish this wiring harness through and get it situated so we can drop this, mate these two pieces together, and then plug our connector in. So we didn't have to be exact with our rectangular cutout, because remember, this piece snaps into the backer piece. The backer piece has pins that utilize the same points, and it'll utilize the same bolts. So the same bolts that hold these corner of the sun visor hangers in also go up through this piece. So this centers with the hood, and this will center with this piece, which will keep this where it needs to be in relation to being center into this little hump here. So let me get to fishing some wire through, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we decided to go ahead and splice into the courtesy light circuit the existing center dome light, so that will come on the same time those courtesy map lights now come on. So basically it means anytime you open and close the door, things of that nature that would cause the what they call the courtesy lights to come on. So we'll get the two lights in the front and the one in the center. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the bulb out of that one temporarily until I can get an LED replacement. That way we know it's much less current. But you can see here we just kind of made our own splice with some insulated, heat shrinked, and adhesive sealed connectors. So again, we just spliced into the what they call the courtesy light circuit. The map light circuit is a little bit different. That is the other yellow wire that you see here. It utilizes the same ground, but it utilizes a different pin for what they consider the map lights. And the reason for that would be is that it gives you the ability to turn those map lights on and off manually via the switch. It also gives the truck the ability to turn those lights on and off using the body control computer. So in other words, even if you push those in and the switches toggle, they'll only come on when the truck is running. In other words, if you have the key out of the ignition, the body control module can still turn those map lights off. So it's kind of like having I guess you'd call it like a three-way switch in there. So what we're going to do is just kind of get this wrapped up, get this neatened up, and finish putting this wiring harness where it needs to go. But we've got the bottom part situated and plugged in. This is what's left of the old harness after we trimmed off the piece that we needed. Now, one thing about this harness is that you'll notice even the one we pulled out of here, the 2012, it has 2, 4, 6 connections on it. Even though it was only using 2 for the dome light, you'll notice there's 6. Well, if you take this harness apart, just like we did the last one, you'll notice that's just a loop. So they're looping the can high and can low in this connector from one set of pins to the other one. So when you're doing modifications like this, it's real important that you look at your wiring diagrams, because in this case, we need to make sure that loop stays there. Otherwise, we're going to interrupt the cab communications of the bus, of modules being able to talk to the bus. And this wiring harness here has that same modifications where they're just looping can high and can low from one side of the connector to the other one, so we're good there. Remember earlier I mentioned that we compared the pinout of the 2010 versus the pinout of the 2012, and it was identical. It had the same pins for the same functions in the same spots, so no issue there. So we're going to go ahead and continue to get this wrapped up, and I'll bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. Well, we got our wiring taken care of there, and yes, we got to do a little bit of work on this trim yet, because it's not laying exactly flat. Like, I could push on it and it flattens out. I think we got to trim a little bit of material from the front of this, but that's beside the point. While we have our headliner loose, we're going to look at our second ad of the evening, and that is going to be the 2010, our parts RAM, once again, had this lovely dimmable mirror. And what this does is when you turn this on, it uses these little eyes here to sense, and the one there in front, to kind of sense when it's dusk, as well as if someone behind you has their brights on, this will auto dim. So it's known as an auto dimming mirror. And the mirror that we have in there now, as you can see there, is just a manual mirror. So we took the auto dimming mirror as well as its wiring harness out of our parts RAM, and we already have the connector kind of sitting there waiting for us. Now I looked at the pins, and it's got the same pins with the same conductors in the same spots. The only difference is this one is white with a green tracer, and it looks like they have white with a red tracer. Other than that, all the other colors of the wire match up. Now, going by the thickness of that, that looks like that's going to be probably a power wire. And of course, it's got some of these other ones. I would say it's probably just return to let the dusk dawn sensor know that it's dusk. Now, this may not work in this particular vehicle. We may have to go into Alpha OBD if it's an option and turn this feature on, because remember, this truck never came with this feature. So I don't know if this is a feature that we're going to have to go in and program, but at least we can go ahead and connect it and get the wiring all situated, and then we can look into seeing if it doesn't work, then we can look into seeing if it's a feature that has to be programmed into the truck. But as far as at least on this side, there's nothing to splice in. It's a plug and play. And this is on the passenger side A pillar. We're going to plug into the existing connector there, run this wiring harness up and through and across and out the existing cutout that's already there in the headliner, and just swap rearview mirrors, get the connector plugged into the back of the mirror, and we should be good. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just getting this routed, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got a mirror installed with our cable plugged in the back, plugged over here again on the passenger side existing connector, and just it had all the same holes were already there as far as the existing Christmas tree clips coming up the top, going across, and then down and around, and finally just dropping the wire out the front there. So like I said, it'll be interesting to see if that works, whether or not it needs any additional tweaks or additional programming to get it to support that. But what we can do now is just go ahead and get all this situated. And I'll go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and plug that module in just so that connector isn't dangling there. But again, it's got no power. It's not going to do anything. And if you look up in there, you'll see the gray one from our harness earlier right there. It had an existing spot, just like it did on the, even though the option wasn't on this truck, the hole was there to plug the Christmas tree clip into. And again, that harness had a connector in it on the 2010 that came from back there off one of the other harnesses. It was part of that harness, had a big tail come forward, plugged into here, and it looked like what it supplied was power and a couple other things that were used by the, again, button for the sliding glass window, which that truck has. This one doesn't, as well as this remote control module here. So anyway, either way, we went ahead and plugged it into its little holder up there, just so it doesn't vibrate and rattle around. And we'll do the same thing in that one. We'll just plug that connector into that module, even though it won't do anything. That way it doesn't rattle around. And yes, you can see we got our supervisor out here that's been meticulously going through the interior of the truck and just doing a little Q&A inspection and giving it her seal of approval, as you can see there. So we're going to work on getting this snapped in place. And I did pull the bulb, as you can see, out of our rear light there. And I will look to see if somebody makes a red version of these, because I know that these are, obviously you can see these are LED. And when this was plugged into the 2010 truck, it's the bright white. Again, not that it's a bad thing, but you know, just trying to save our night vision in the case we need to use this at night. Okay, so let me get this plugged back in, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we went ahead and put our pillars back in, our sun visors, so everything's reassembled at this point. And if you're going to do this mod yourself, the donor truck you take the parts off of, remember it's at least 4 pieces. It's the backing piece that these bolts that hold part of your, that activate your sun visor clips bolt into. So there's that piece we looked at earlier. We were lining up to make our cut. You've got this outer trim piece that the lights are actually hooked into, and you got this inner trim piece. So apologize for it being a little bit dark, but there's a method to the madness here. So we went ahead and put this button in, even though we don't have a rear sliding glass window. It was mainly just to kind of take up the space. There wasn't a big gaping hole. And of course, we've already covered that these buttons won't work as well. We wanted them just for the map lights. So if we open up the door to simulate like we're entering the truck or exiting the truck after it's already been asleep, we should get some lights there. And perfect, we do. So that's working like it should. I'm just going to close the door, and it'll probably take about 30 to 40 seconds for the truck to go to sleep and turn these off. But these are no different than the center dome light. It's considered a courtesy light because it turns that one on for us. And then, of course, we've always got the ability to push up on these and actuate the switches and turn the map lights on. And we'll give it a try here. I'm not sure if we can do that without the key in the ignition, but you can see they dim, they fade out, they go away. And yes, we can. Okay, so even that functionality is working as well. So beautiful. Okay, so the only thing I would like to change on this, as I was commenting earlier, is I want to see if they've got some red lights we can put in there rather than the blinding white ones. And of course, I want to change this out to LED before we allow that one to come on the same circuit as that one, since it wasn't intended to drive 2. But if we switch them all out to LED, the current draw should be less enough that it should be fine. And of course, you can see we got our rear view mirror in. And of course, we don't have the key in the ignition, but well, it's something that we'll have to test a bit later, especially once we get the truck outside and we can get into some dusk type conditions and see if that will work or if it's going to require some additional programming. But this one was pretty much straightforward. As you saw, the donor truck you take your parts out of, obviously you'll need the rear view mirror, and you'll need the wiring harness that goes from here, clips all the way across down the passenger A-pillar, and plugs into that existing connector. So not too much hardware to grab on this one, just wiring harness and rear view mirror. This one, like I said, 4 pieces, wiring harness, the main support backing piece, this inner trim, outer trim piece, and then this inner trim piece. Now when putting this back together, to show you this here, there are 2 of them. These are the little spacers if you don't have this module that sit underneath here where it anchors the sun visor basically attachment point. You can unclip it from that attachment point. Yeah, it's pretty tight. But basically you can unclip it from that point and flip the sun visor over here to block the sun coming out of the door window. And what happens is if you don't have this piece, which has that support bracket underneath, this is actually underneath here between the headliner and the cab of the truck, and it's just there to kind of take up that excess space. So if you're doing this mod and you've got that bracket in, you're going to take these pieces out before you tighten up that support fixture again. Other than that, that is it. I think we'll call this a video and kind of do this one a little bit shorter than normal. Haven't installed the sensor yet, but like I promised you, that when we do come back, the video that covers us replacing the sensor, we'll also do another cold start on the truck and just continue to check our fluid levels there. Provided everything goes okay with the second cold start and that sensor works accordingly, then what we'll do is we'll see about getting this thing out on the street and doing the little bit of a test drive that our tuner is looking for us to accomplish first. Anyway, with that being said, hopefully this video was helpful to you. Just wanted to bring you along and kind of show you the 2 additional mods we were looking at now that they're complete. Like I said, it looks good. It looks factory. I guess the tip here was just putting that backing piece on first and kind of just made very small cuts and kind of worked our way out to make sure we didn't cut too much material out. So with that being said, I will let you go. And if you have subscribed to the channel already, I do thank you immensely. If you have not, please consider doing so. I'd be much appreciative. And with that, I will bring you back for the next one, and I will chat at you later. Bye.